guys have more fun things coming ahead of me, after me. I'm Christine Puccini. I'm the Director of Business Development and Member Services for the Marin Builders Association. I want to welcome you all here today. We are very honored to be hosting the Marin, local Marin brown bag lunches every month. Thank you for coming. A couple of housekeeping items. If you have parked in our back parking area, I need you to go move your car. We have tenants that use that area for their clients, and so hopefully you've parked across the street. Restrooms located in the hallway. We have 2 emergency exits right there, and then behind those screens right there. Again, we're very happy to be hosting you guys today, and I want to tell you a little bit about the association. We are a nonprofit organization. We have been in existence since 1958. We dedicate to industry, advocacy, education, and community, and we really focus heavily on membership value. We're an excellent resource for you. Our website, marinbuilders.org, I invite you to take a tour of that to see more about all we are and all we do. On our website, you'll find our online directory of members. Those are local licensed contractors and businesses who would love to provide their services to you. We have valuable news there, information about local events, job opportunities, and so much more. If you or anyone you know is interested in more information about Marin Builders, I would love to speak with them. Feel free to pick up one of my cards or one of our wide join pieces in the back. On the table on the back, first of all, I'm holding a raffle. Drop your business card in there. We're going to be raffling off one of our really high-level first aid kits. Would love to give that away to somebody. I also have a piece called Why Join. It outlines very clearly all of the values of membership with us. Love for you to take a piece home with you and take a quick look through that and call me if you have any questions. This facility is also for rent. You do not need to be a member in order to rent this room. So if you're interested in more information about that, there's some information on that as well. And I also would invite you to take one of our fabulous new Marin Home Resource Guides. It's our new publication. We're really proud of it. It has some great thoughtful information about the organization, as well as a directory of all of our contractors and more in the back. And I would love you to pick one up and consider it a resource for your home and business. Thank you, and now on to the presentation.
Thank you very much. And again, a hand for the Marin Builders. They do this at no cost, and it's because they care about the community that we're able to do these events, and it's really wonderful to have their help on this stuff. So without further ado, there's plenty to do here, I would like to introduce the speakers today for our talk on the future of cannabis. Just a moment or two, I'd just like to say that I know that we have a lot of questions, and there's a lot of new laws and a lot of new ways that I think a lot of us have never even been to an area where there's legalization, and so we don't know what that's going to be about. So I tried to get 3 of the best speakers that I could, the best qualified speakers that I could, to inform all of us here in Marin about what our future is like now that cannabis has been legalized thanks to Prop 64. So the speakers that we have here today, in the center is Rafael. She's founder of ONA Life, or ONA Life, a boutique cannabis delivery service located in Marin County. To my left is Sabrina Pendrick, who is the Director of Governmental Affairs at the Berkeley Patient Group and founder of Normal Women's Alliance. And then Shabnam Malik, who is the founding partner of Brand & Brand LLP and president of the National Cannabis Bar Association. Thank you very much, ladies. Let's find out a lot more about the future of cannabis. Thanks.
Everybody, we just wanted to thank you all for coming, and a big thank you to Russell for inviting us here today. We've been trying to do as many community outreach events like this as possible, so we thank you all for coming. As you said, I'm the founder of a cannabis delivery service here in Marin County and the president of the Marin County Couriers Association here, so we're very excited to be here. I guess we're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to start by asking the ladies some questions and kind of do a little Q&A after that. So we're just going to jump into how did we get here today in 2017. I know cannabis has come a really long way with regulations, and there's been what's the background and the history that you know about so far, Sabrina?
Thank you, Mary. Hi, I'm Sabrina Pendrick, as I was introduced. And just real quick about me, I've been involved in the cannabis industry and cannabis reform movement for about 10 years. I worked at the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. for 7 years in Washington, D.C., and was involved in a lot of the federal and different state policy efforts. So it's been a really interesting 10 years to see sort of when I started, George Bush was president, and you know, if you had told me that there were 8 states with legal marijuana and we'd be here today, then I would have thought you were completely insane. So it's been really exciting, and I'm really honored to be a part of this. So yeah, just a little bit of background. First of all, how many of you guys are familiar with the history of cannabis law and nationally or statewide? So, okay, all right, great. And how many of you remember Proposition 215 in 1996? Okay, good. So there's a couple of you guys who are familiar with it. I'm going to start there. I originally wanted to nerd out and start with 1937. We don't have enough time for that, unfortunately. We could do a whole nother panel on that. But I'm just going to start with sort of how our modern day industry got to where it is today. And essentially, both on a national and on a state level, the modern day cannabis industry started about 20 years ago with the passage of Proposition 215 in 1996, which was generally driven by a group of grassroots activists and HIV/AIDS patients who really wanted to make sure that their loved ones had safe access to medical cannabis, which was the only medication that was providing relief to HIV/AIDS patients, since back then there wasn't a lot of research, and a lot of people were just starting to learn about it and starting to create medicine for it. So, and that was being from BPG, one of our founders, Jim McClellan, was an HIV/AIDS patient who was very involved with that. And Berkeley Patients Group was founded in 1999 and is the oldest continuously operating dispensary in the country. So they've also been there since the very beginning. And Proposition 215 was very basic. It was one paragraph, and it just generally created the first legal framework allowing patients to safely and legally access cannabis. It provided for collectives and community areas so patients could gather and trade medicine and have a safe place to consume in what was otherwise a somewhat hostile environment. In 2003, SB 420 passed, which was Senate Bill 420, which sort of established guidelines for Proposition 215 and recognized the right for individuals to individually or collectively cultivate cannabis. And those could be done through collectives or co-ops, which was the basis for business structures of businesses in California. And then they also allowed for local regulation. So all different districts were allowed to create frameworks within their jurisdiction to permit different businesses and different operations. And at that time, it was really more about sort of the patient-front, patient-facing operations, so allowing for dispensaries. And you had Northern California was very progressive in that. Oakland and Berkeley were the first 2 cities in America, actually, to create a permit program for dispensaries. And that occurred in 2004. So the industry stayed mostly quiet through the Clinton and Bush years. There were a lot of raids that were still going on. And you know, just for a little bit of context, any business operation that was permitted, or even I guess ones that weren't really permitted, within their training included what to do in the case of a raid. And that's actually something that was still left over when I first started at BPG. Part of the initial training was actually how you handle a raid, and you know, what your rights are and everything like that, which is pretty unique to any business in any industry. So then we had 2008 happened. And Obama was elected, who ran on a platform of being more tolerant of cannabis operators and patients having access, and even he had mentioned decriminalizing it. Michigan voted in medical marijuana, Massachusetts voted to decriminalize cannabis, and there really seemed to be a large groundswell of support building at that time for policy change. Obviously not what we see now, but back then compared to what it was before, it was new and refreshing. So we then had the Cole memos come out, and the first one was in 2009. These were from the Department of Justice Deputy Attorney General Cole, which created guidelines for priorities for federal prosecutors. And it essentially said that they were not to prioritize going after cannabis businesses that were legally complying with their state rules, that and they had to meet certain criteria. They they had to prevent distribution to minors. They had to prevent diversion to other states. They weren't allowed to fund cartel operations. Drug driving, also arms. They couldn't have any guns on the premises or anything like that. And so they that base really emboldened a lot of operators in Southern California, where there really was no regulation. There were bans in certain places, but there were still operators. And that was really when you started to see a proliferation or explosion of businesses coming above ground and really making their presence known. And when you hear about the Venice Beach, doctors writing notes on the boardwalk, and all of these sort of sketchy operations popping up in Los Angeles all over the place, where there's more dispensaries than Starbucks, and really sort of giving the cannabis industry a bad rap and a bad image. And I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, and I remember hearing this is when a lot of other states were starting to consider moving forward with cannabis policies, and every single governor or law official would say, we don't want to be California, we don't want to be California. And California really started getting a bad rap for how they were handling their marijuana regulations, or lack thereof. And it was really unfair, because when they say that, they actually mean Southern California, and they actually meant Los Angeles.
You call it the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, they called it the Wild Wild West, and everybody seemed to forget that Northern California, or many parts of Northern California, were actually incredibly highly regulated and had been for a really long time. But so essentially, there were a couple of raids that still went on in Southern California. And it definitely took a while for jurisdictions down there to get it together. Actually, it's still happening. They're still trying to figure it all out down there. And then we have, we go in 2010, Proposition 19. Who remembers Proposition 19? Proposition 19 was the first proposition attempt, well, second actually. There was one in 1972, which was also Proposition 19, to legalize and regulate cannabis. And it was the first one in the country. It was also organized by grassroots activists that weren't funded very well, and it wasn't written in a way that really wasn't going to be implemented in a productive way for the state. And it unfortunately failed well, it's bittersweet. It failed. But it's actually, in my opinion, a really good thing, because in 2012, Colorado and Washington then legalized cannabis, and thank God, because we've been able to learn so much from what they've done and how they've moved forward with their programs and their policies, and learn from their mistakes. I think it would have been incredibly challenging and potentially disastrous for California to have been the first state to try to do this, and in 2010. So then we have 2014, policy change was gaining even more momentum and things were speeding up, and that was when the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment passed as part of the Omnibus Bill, which prevented the Department of Justice from using federal funds to go after businesses that were complying with state law. And that's literally the only actual legal protection that the industry has right now. And that only applies to medical cannabis at the moment. It doesn't actually apply to adult use. So, and also that same year, Alaska, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. voted to legalize cannabis. So the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment actually is part of the annual bill, so it has to keep being renewed every year. And well, we don't have to go into details of the omnibus bill, but for some reason, the Farr Amendment has to be renewed, or continues to need to be renewed every 6 months or so. So we're coming up on another renewal, which is always a very stressful time, and this is actually in September. Since it's part of the larger budget and there's general consensus and it's passed every time since 2014, we're relatively confident, but you really never know in this situation. So in 2015, California passed the California State Legislature passed the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, and that was to create guidelines. How are we on time? Okay. That was to create guidelines and create a real regulatory structure for the medical cannabis industry. And that was, they did that in anticipation of a recreational bill being put on the ballot for 2016. I was part of that process, which was very interesting. There were a lot of interest groups, and there was a lot of back and forth and compromise, and you know, what ended up coming together was pretty good, you know, especially considering how large California is, the general state of the industry, and trying to bring everybody into compliance. It was a huge bill, and it passed in the last hour of the last day of the legislative session. So that was great. And then in 2016, California passed the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. And the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, they actually waited to write the language for that until the passage of the MCRSA so they could mirror it as much as they could. Also, we had Nevada and Maine and Massachusetts pass recreational marijuana, as well as Florida, North Dakota, Arkansas, and passing medical marijuana. So today we have 8 states with adult use marijuana laws and nearly 30 states with cannabis regulations, which doesn't include obscure CBD rules, allowances. And 21% of the US population now live in legal marijuana markets. So now we have California and the MCRSA and ALMA, and the governor has recently signed a trailer bill which combined the two, and we're now, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, which is the bureau that's going to be overseeing this whole program, is creating regulations to help the industry, or for the industry guidelines to be compliant with the laws. And they are, they're developing that right now. They're actually going to make emergency regulations because they had to scrap what they had originally written since the trailer bill was signed after original proposed regulations. And it's really created an evolution of different product types and industry operations, and everything is becoming a lot more mature and a lot more professional. So we're seeing all kinds of products, all kinds of really responsible operators coming together with proper protocols and security measures and retail operations. So that's been really interesting to see. Is there, do you want to talk about Marin?
Yeah, I was going to ask if we could go back to 2014 and 2015 about the local government that you mentioned. Here in Marin County, I think everyone's pretty curious to know where we are today and what do we see is going to happen. I you know, have my own delivery service here and have been as, you know, supportive and as active as possible for the trailer bill and getting them to amend delivery language. I don't know if you guys know, but there was no delivery language for cannabis delivery services in the trailer bill, and it was almost a not going to happen type of thing. So me and a bunch of people around California band together and went to every public hearing we could and mimicked the same language, and we got it amended into the trailer bill, which is really exciting. And I know that Marin County is saying that they only want deliveries here. Can you
Could you explain delivery, what delivery means?
Yeah, absolutely. So delivery service would be exactly just not open to the public. So there would be some sort of office or hub where people like myself would work inside of with a fulfillment center, and patients would call in, order, and then it would get delivered out. That's how a delivery would work or operate.
Is there a license for that?
So that's exactly what the trailer bill just added in there, where they're going to put out licenses, and what we're hoping is that the County of Marin will issue some licenses, and maybe the City of San Rafael or Nevada or Larkspur will also issue some licenses as well.
So how are you currently doing business that way?
I'm working under the Prop 215 collective law.
Okay.
So essentially how everybody, there's a lot of local control regulations in the state bill, and it provides for delivery, but the local government has to actually authorize that type of operation, for that operation to get a local and state license. And they're really, the Bureau is really good in being transparent and really wants to bring all of these existing operations into compliance, because it exists. There were laws that allowed for it, and really there's the whole goal is to drive out the black market and bring in and recognize and authorize the good operators. So, you know, in terms of what Marin's trying to do, they passed an ordinance in 2015 which allowed for 4 dispensaries and has created this entire application process. They had very strict zoning rules and buffer regulations, and there were only actually around 180 available parcels in all of unincorporated Marin County that one could potentially operate out of. It did not include delivery, but it allowed for a dispensary to have a delivery operation. So that's always been an issue, both on the state level and the local level, is whether they, you know, tying them together, allowing them to operate separately.
I have a question. In Marin, I know that there was a place that was a dispensary by this on Lucas Valley Road, and then they said they could only deliver. They couldn't. The dispensary is no longer legal, but now there is a dispensary in Fairfax. So was there a new law that's been passed?
Lynette Shaw has her own federal case, correct?
Yeah. Yes, that there is that, but so Lynette Shaw is actually in the city of Fairfax, which is not the jurisdiction of unincorporated Marin County. So that Marin County, there's all San Rafael City, and then there's, which has their mayor and their city council, and then there's the county, which is only the jurisdiction of the county supervisors. And Lynette Shaw is authorized by the city of Fairfax, not by the county of Marin, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. So so what you're saying then, each incorporated city in Marin can have their own laws regarding regulation and distribution?
Absolutely, yeah. And any business that's operating out of any of those cities should be working with their city council to make sure they do have regulations and a permitting program for their operation. Yeah.
Brick and mortar dispensaries in Marin.
We're gonna do Q&A after,
All
but
right, that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
You're supposed to be asking questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
No, we want to hear all the questions.
Exactly.
Yeah, but she was going to hit on the brick and mortar with the 2015 ordinance that came out.
Yeah, so that was what the Marin County, unincorporated Marin County ordinance allowed for, was the brick and mortar, and it was up to 4, and so there were about 10 or 11 applicants.
There was 11 applicants.
And full disclosure, principals that I'm involved with were applicants who were Marin community partners. And I can tell you that the real estate challenge was unbelievable. There was really, they coupled the operator with the location. So you had to be a good operator, and you had to find a location that worked, well, was conducive to the community and the county supervisors. I would say a small but loud vocal minority that was very aggressive and was very adamant about any dispensary operating in a general proximity or vicinity of where that was, you know, a business may be located. They ended up denying every single one of the applicants. It was sort of a general denial. It wasn't, and they were all essentially based on the location. I can't remember what the exact language was. What disrupting the peace and welfare. There wasn't really any quantifiable evidence or reasoning behind each particular applicant, but you know, everybody ended up well, there were six appeals, and they were all universally denied for generally the same reason. And I
remember the Dipsy's rejection was like a flood zone in their parking lot, but you know, there's been a restaurant there for over 20 years, so there's no real.
Yeah. Exactly. Some of the biggest issues that the individuals in the community that really came out were, they were concerned about traffic, they were concerned about youth access, and they were concerned about the increase in crime. And you know, most of the general applicants, you know, had community meetings and really presented a lot of facts. You know, we're lucky in seeing that all of these operations are in other states and have data to actually look at to address a lot of these concerns and see what happens, see if crime increases or youth access increases. And what we've seen is that none of those things have happened. Actually, teen use has gone down. In Colorado, it's one of the lowest in the country. And a very recent study just came out and showed that when LA did a massive shutdown of hundreds of dispensaries in the area, crime actually went up. And they found that it was, you know, when you have these operations and these dispensaries, there's more vigilance and there's more eyes on the street. And so it actually serves as a deterrent. And that didn't, well, I think there's a bit more education that needs to be done. There's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to cannabis and cannabis businesses. Legalization passed by about 80% in Marin County. So people are for it. It just sort of comes down to understanding like the impact and implications of these operations as
NIMBYism.
I don't you said it for me. Yeah, it is NIMBYism. And I really, you know, I think that it has a lot to do, you know, there were the people that came out, the people that were very vocal were very passionate about it. They were a small, tiny percentage of the overall population of unincorporated Marin County, but it was very threatening. They were very vocal, very aggressive, and it sort of created this culture of fear that made it hard for, I think, the county administrator and the supervisors to really move forward with their plan that they had developed and worked on for a really long time. So now they're in the stage of sort of rewriting it. They're bringing in delivery services as an option, and
well, they
you
basically
can talk about sort of where we are now with the.
They made a statement basically saying that they do not want brick and mortars here in Marin County anywhere, but they want to do delivery only models. So a new ordinance will come out at the end of the month from Marin County. There'll be about a month of public comment. So if there's any of you out there that are yeses, we need the yeses because the no's seem to be stronger even though it's a smaller amount. I wanted to ask Shabnam,
So that's the unincorporated area, this new ordinance you're talking
Yes,
about?
it's all
Yes.
Just unincorporated.
right, yeah. And I think they'll keep it to 4 licenses, it sounds like. But I wanted to ask Shabnam, since we were on the topic of kids and she's in IP advertising and child safety, what do you see the future and how do we keep them safe?
Right, so that's a really good question. So I am an attorney in San Francisco and I practice intellectual property law for regular businesses as well as the cannabis industry. And a big part of what we do is look at the laws and regulations that dictate the kind of labeling and packaging requirements that are necessary for largely manufactured products, which seems to be the biggest area of concern, and that is edibles, right? There's a big industry of edibles. It's generally less than 25% of the market in terms of market share and sales, but it still represents a lot of what you'll see in dispensaries and a lot of the fear-mongering actually that goes on is around this idea of what happens if a child consumes edibles. So that policy concern is what drives a lot of the laws and the regulations. And right now, for example, there are 7 pending bills before the state legislature. 5 of them are directly focused on how to keep cannabis out of the hands of children, how to reduce advertising towards children, directed at children, and I mean under 21 as well as under 18, the whole gamut. So there's a lot of stuff actually. So what Sabrina was saying is that we had this set of laws, NCRSA, that was passed by our state legislature. And those laws had a set of regulations that came down from the 3 state agencies, about 3 state agencies that were meant to implement these laws. So you have your statutory laws that happen, and then you have regulations that interpret those and give nuance and really tell you. The law might say marijuana is legal, the regulation will say this is how you set up a business to sell legal marijuana. So we had those statutes passed. During that same period of time, Prop 64 passed, that's a voter initiative. So you can't modify voter initiatives the way you can modify state legislative laws, right? The voter initiative says itself how it can be modified. So what happened is when the governor signed this latest legislative bill, SB 94, it modified the first set of statutes we had because they were just passed by the state legislature, and it aligned those with the voter initiative law, AUMA. So now we're going to get a whole new set of regulations that interprets what we have now. So the old regulations are gone. However, we can learn something from the old regulations, and they were very instructive. And a lot of what's in the new law in AUMA and SB 94 actually mirrors that language. So we have requirements like child
Safety.
Thank you, yeah, exactly. Child-resistant packaging and resealable packaging for manufactured products. And they don't distinguish, by the way, between edibles and topicals, which is kind of a bummer, but. So that, we don't know yet if that is for exit packaging or for the actual product manufacturer, but that's one thing. You may not manufacture any edibles products to resemble candy that would be attractive to children. No colorful packaging, no cartoon characters. Some ambiguous language in pending bills, like nothing in the shape of candy or the shapes that candy ordinarily comes in. I don't know what that might be. It could be a square. Yeah, right. No gummy bears. You know, things like cotton candy. You're not going to see any of that. So this idea that we're all going to all of a sudden have marijuana-infused cotton candy just laying around in our houses for our children to eat, that's not what's going to happen. And the state is doing a lot of this parenting for us. Yeah. And so it's a concern that I think when we see people coming out, my husband and all three of our children have gone to some hearings in San Francisco for dispensary permits in San Francisco, and we see a lot of this fear of what's going to happen when you bring the products home. And I'm here to tell you that the state regulators are thinking about this, and there's a lot of requirements put on the industry. And the industry actually is already implementing some of these. We have products that are
Stash Logic, the
right,
boxes.
exactly. We have an entire product packaging industry that is already addressing this concern of reusable and child-resistant packaging. People are very mindful about how they label their products. You really do know when something has cannabis in it. We IP attorneys don't advise that clients use the same trademark on uninfused and infused products, so we're really trying to distinguish the products that have marijuana in them from products that don't. The state of Colorado has actually prohibited using the same branding on infused and uninfused products. That comes out of a case in Colorado where folks were spraying gummy bears with marijuana oil and then just selling them as gummy bears. And so it created a lot of confusion and risk in the industry, so the state reacted to that, and that's what happens in California. There's a lot of regulations in that area. So, and this is the same for dispensaries and access to dispensaries. This idea that children are going to get into dispensaries, it's completely unfounded. They're highly regulated, and that's going to be as true for adult use dispensaries as it is for medical cannabis dispensaries. There's security regulations, there's track and trace programs. The state is going to know from seedling all the way to finished edible product what is in that and what happened to that cannabis. So it's, there's going to be no diversion of cannabis. The whole memo is really important actually to this industry, despite the fact that it's not a law. It provides a lot of the guidance that gives us some comfort about the Department of Justice not coming in and enforcing in this state. And seed-to-sale tracking is a big part of preventing diversion. So this is just some of the rules and regulations around child safety and consumer safety and consumption safety.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got 20 minutes. Should we do Q&A?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of
Yeah,
questions.
I know.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to say it's a friend's daughter. So she's down in Santa Barbara, and she delivers marijuana. Okay, so she has a medical card, so she's allowed to carry an ounce legally. Okay, up to an ounce, right? Legally. And she goes around, she has a friend, and they deliver marijuana to her, and she goes out and she delivers it, and she's making a crap load of money delivering this thing. And if she was stopped carrying marijuana, she has a medical card, so she can't be prosecuted. Is that going to change?
I guess what's the point of the question?
Well, the point of the question is, if she has a business, is it legal, and it become this come under the new
She's
law?
going to need a local license from her local, wherever she's living, and then she's also going to have to apply for a state license. So there's going to be about a year-long process for her to get legal. Yeah.
Any sort of commercial transaction is going to require a license from the state and the local government.
The reason I'm asking that is because come January 1, the medical card's going to go away. Is that right?
No, medical card's not going to go away. It's still going to be in use, but it's the only thing that's going to provide is somebody is not going to have to pay the retail sales tax.
But there's also saying, Marin County put a ban on recreational sales, so there will be no recreational selling, use going on here.
Yes, hello. Question, I understand that when unincorporated areas accept selling cannabis in their communities, that they will get some money back from the state. So my question is, I'm a little unclear how that would work in Marin. Do those, is Marin going to get the full quota, those who, dispensaries, of the tax benefit of the new law, or are they going to be limited based on the fact that maybe they only have delivery service as opposed to brick and mortar? I just want some clarification on that.
Yeah, Marin County, because they banned recreational cannabis, they would not be given the
benefit of the taxes from,
yeah,
okay,
they would not
good.
receive
I mean,
it.
did I hear you say that Marin is not going to, the law is not going to go in effect in Marin?
Well, unincorporated Marin County has effectively banned recreational cannabis.
Even in spite of the proposition?
Yes, because it allows for local control, so local jurisdictions can choose to opt out of.
Oh, so they do have that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so they do want to authorize some form of medical cannabis operations, delivery it's looking like, but not recreation.
The reason I'm asking these questions is that I was a dope lawyer in the early 70s for many years, and I was involved with NORML, and I was actually prosecuted because I was a dope lawyer, in charge of 2 felonies, and I could have been in prison, but we got off on a motion to suppress, so I'm glad to see. It's amazing. I mean, no one would have believed, and actually some of the judges back in the 70s called for the legalization of all drugs to see finally it is actually happening. So
It's amazing.
it's exciting.
How is the legislation affecting internet sales? I tried to, I went online and it seemed to me like I could have ordered edibles out of Colorado looking like Tootsie Rolls. This was just a few months ago. I was curious to try it. And yeah, and they were perfectly willing to ship it to California, and I was wondering what the legality of that is.
That's not illegal. That's
Crazy.
Don't do that.
Okay, so how are the, so is regulation being perpetrated to sort of monitor internet traffic, because it's very easy to order it online?
You are right, and I think there are a lot of companies out there that are doing third-party shipping, which is extremely illegal.
Yeah,
people are doing it. We don't advise to order from them, or
They
definitely don't cross state lines.
They're out of compliance with the Cole Memo, the FAR amendment.
There's
They would be
nothing to
subject
be
to
said
federal
that
prosecution.
there's nothing to be said that you wouldn't send that money out to them and that you get anything back. It's the internet, you know.
And some of them might be saying,
But I do want to say that you can purchase over the internet, like from my delivery service. You can put an order in your local area. Yeah, locally, internet is completely fine and compliant.
We don't permit online sales in a way that would allow, for instance, someone in San Francisco to send through the mail cannabis to someone in San Diego. The state law isn't sort of contemplating that.
So
right
I think
now.
there needs to be some education around that,
Right,
because
so
as a
what
consumer, it seems like
yeah,
it
so
wouldn't be
as a
breaking any
consumer,
rules.
do not buy anything that appears to you that it's coming from out of state. That is a violation of federal law. It has nothing to do with the state. The federal government will prosecute you, and that crime carries mandatory minimum.
It's like
You
by
do
grant
not
state,
want to be receiving cannabis in the mail that you don't know where it comes from, so probably you don't know where it comes from, so don't try and get yourself that mess.
Yeah, that would be interstate commerce.
When they're
so
talking
federal law
about,
applies.
it's traveling across state lines, when they're talking about delivery, what they mean is that the cannabis derives from a location within the state of California and within your local jurisdiction, and is being delivered to you by a human being traveling under the new state law. They'll be traveling in a car, but right now folks are basically sort of, there's bicycle messengers and that sort of thing, but that method is all going to be regulated under new state law. There's requirements about what kind of vehicle must be driven, the kind of security around that vehicle, where it must leave from, and when it must arrive, that it cannot do anything else in its course of delivery. Your delivery man or woman can't stop and grab a slice of pizza, can't stop and visit his or her mom. They must go from the location that the cannabis was stored at to the location that the cannabis is going to be delivered. So there should be nothing should be arriving to your house in the mail.
yeah.
And you should question the source of that, and you are liable for that. If that happens to you, you and the seller are both guilty of a federal crime. So don't do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so these laws, are there distinctions made between CBD that doesn't have THC in it, or are all these laws geared towards THC? Because there are products now out there that are strictly CBD with no THC, and you can buy them online. So I'm questioning whether or not there's a distinction being made, and can you legally buy and sell CBD online?
You asked 10 different lawyers and
I was going to say,
10 different answers.
you are. I'm always very conservative and cautious, and generally, most people say that, marijuana is a federal Schedule I controlled substance, and it says, THC and its derivatives, which includes CBD. Some might argue that there's no THC, therefore it's not subject to that, but I believe the DEA has said that it is subject to that because it is a derivative of and a relationship with THC. It's part of the same plant, and it's really the whole plant. And there's also I haven't heard of anybody being prosecuted. Well, actually, I have heard of one or two companies. And it's mostly actually a major health concern because they're FDA enforcement. They're getting this CBD hemp oil. Well, those are two separate things, but they're coming from very sketchy places in Eastern Europe and China, and they've actually made people really, really sick. So, there's a lot of reasons to, once again, really stick with your local business for legal and health reasons to get your CBD only.
CBD is not legal as a dietary supplement either, is that correct? The FDA does not accept CBD as a dietary supplement.
It's not considered a dietary supplement right now,
but a
but
lot of
the
people
FDA
think it
is
is,
doing
because it's
so.
sold as a dietary supplement, but the FDA has said this is not a dietary supplement.
Right.
CBD's got a lot of problems, and whether it derives from hemp or it derives from cannabis, it's sort of falling in various gray areas. But you will find some stuff that's available by the mail and nationwide. But again, it's really sketchy. It's very murky, the area of law. There's a farm bill passed by Congress a few years ago that's permitted the cultivation of domestic hemp that's highly regulated. It's only happening on a handful of locations and campuses in the United States. So maybe that's where the CBD is coming from. And so it's murky, and really, you'll get 10 different answers from 10 different people.
You in the back?
Yeah, I have a question about cannabis advertising and marketing. How is that going to be regulated? Is that going to be similar to what the ABC does with alcohol? Or
Yeah, it's a good question, because then you just see, buds of cannabis. So
yeah, and buses and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, urban farm, ease, it literally says push button, get now. Right. I'm pretty sure Marin County will not allow any sort of advertising. I know during the application process for the dispensary, there was supposed to be no signage at all.
Is there a state?
No signage.
There's no statewide regulation on that kind of
So there is,
marketing?
yeah. So SB 94 and AUMA both contemplate some statewide regulations on advertising, labeling, and packaging. And there's some general guidelines. Anything that's advertised through broadcast media or internet may only be advertised to an audience where 71.6% of the audience is 21 or older, and this is for adult use, but you may as well advertise your cannabis the same way. Age gating is going to be required for 21 and over on anything internet. It's internet advertising, but generally informational pages might be considered advertising. There's a really broad statute being contemplated, this SB 162, which purports to ban the use of apparel or other merchandise for advertising. So that might mean, similar to the tobacco bans actually, that you won't see cannabis company trademarks and logos on apparel. It could mean that you also won't see that stuff on secondary merchandise like ashtrays and lighters and things of that nature. There's always signage bans about what the exterior of a building might look like. Generally, that's left up to localities. And there's a ban on billboards. No cannabis advertising on billboards that are on interstate highways or intrastate highways that are near a border between California and another state. Which actually you'll see right now on the 80, if you're crossing the Bay Bridge, you see lots of advertising for a couple of my clients. On big giant billboards, so that sucks. But and then some of the other stuff is sort of left up to localities or social media platforms, things like that.
So it doesn't sound like it's been resolved, is what you're saying.
Right. There's like there's regs that are about to come.
Yeah.
Because alcohol advertising is statewide. There's no.
Well, this is all statewide.
There's no local. There's no local input, it's all state law.
So with the cannabis laws, there's the set of statewide laws, which is everything that I just said is statewide, and then the localities are permitted to do more than that. So the localities can just wholesale prohibit, say, advertising on public transportation systems. San Francisco could just not allow that. Right now they do allow it. But there's a lot of power given to localities in AUMA and SB 94. It's part of the horse trading, essentially, that California state did in order to get the localities on board.
So they can only limit it, they can't expand upon.
Generally, when you have a bigger law, a local law may not be more liberal, which is actually sort of the basis of state medical cannabis laws. Historically has always had this problem, right? How do you get around federal preemption? But as a general rule, setting aside cannabis laws, a legal idea is that when you have a bigger law that's more strict, your local law cannot loosen that, but it can always make it more strict. So that's generally how it is. So for instance,
who's gonna determine those kind of things, though? Whether you're talking about branding and lifestyle, like a clothing company that might want to have a cannabis-related brand. I mean, who decides that?
So right now, the state legislature is deciding that, and they're setting forth pending laws like SB 162, and they'll dictate to manufacturers and product lines what they may
so
and may not do.
But like an ABC organization?
There's 3 agencies. So
Okay.
the state laws created an agency, the Bureau of Cannabis Regulation, Cannabis Control. So that's the primary agency that sort of oversees all the cannabis activities. It'll do the licensing and permitting. And then there's different agencies, the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture are both highly involved. For a lot of the labeling and packaging, that's the Department of Health. So it just sort of depends on who's been given authority under the state laws to implement regulations and enforce these different laws and regs.
Thank you. But, yeah.
Can you comment on banking issues and how proceeds of sale, or is it all cash that has to be transported? Can you use banks?
So yes, that's a big.
You guys using banks? You too?
I just got, I actually wasn't, I've been in a bank, First Republic Bank, since 2002. And just last month I got a letter saying I can no longer bank with them, and it wasn't even a business account, it was my personal,
MPP was their account?
MPP did, yeah. No, banking is very tricky right now. There, you know, even one of the Department of Justice memos a couple of years ago was issued in conjunction with the Department of Treasury and FinCEN guidelines that tried to give guidelines and authorize banks to work with the cannabis operators, but it actually made the banks even more gun shy about it because they only operate within strict laws and regulations, not just the memos.
So this is all cash?
Well, so there are banks that do work with cannabis businesses. There's the issue of 280E, which is getting these tax deductions, not getting federal business tax deductions and issues like that. So there's a lot more overhead, but a lot of people do go through different banks all the time. It's very prevalent. There's a couple of banks in Oregon that are openly working with businesses. In Colorado, they tried to create a credit union, but they had to get approval from the Fed, which they didn't get, so that actually didn't go through. And in California,
like cryptocurrency now.
Yeah,
too.
Everybody's really trying to get really creative about this, and the BOE in California really, because they're the ones that take in all this taxes, they are pushing the hardest to get some sort of banking situation. They're trying to come up with a creative way to create a bank in California to do that. And so far, nobody's been successful in creating a bank, but there is banking. It's just not everywhere.
They take credit cards.
So the problem with
They
do.
take debit cards.
No, they take credit cards.
Well, I
too.
heard Harborside just
They'll
started
take,
using
oh,
credit cards.
they'll take credit cards until the credit card processor
Shuts them down.
So you'll see a lot of that. And the problem is that the credit card systems and the banks are all subject to the federal deposit insurance. And so when you can't insure the deposits that you're taking, you essentially cannot run a bank in this country. And that insurance, either you have to basically privately insure your deposits, right? Or you have to seek that insurance guarantee from the federal government. So when the federal government fails to provide that insurance or is going to repeal your insurance because they did an audit and your banking customers didn't meet the requirements even perhaps of the FinCEN guidelines, then your bank is in trouble. Once you lose that federal backing, then all of your deposits are exposed. So even if somebody was to open up, put in this building, let's dig a hole downstairs, put everyone's cash, your problem is how do you ensure that? You're now at the same amount of risk that a dispensary might be if they have a vault with $1 million cash in it. And that's the problem, is that you can't get this federal insurance. And the credit card processing systems are all backed by the federal government as well, and they're engaging in interstate commerce. And so everybody is doing it until they get bumped off of it. And this includes policy organizations, lawyers. Everybody is feeling the effects of this banking restriction. It's really difficult. Yes?
So the banking system they may be looking at California, is that the same system that with the Public Bank of North Dakota? Are you familiar with that? Is the bank in North Dakota, are their deposits self-insured or are they FDIC insured? I think that's what California's trying to model their system under.
I've heard a little bit recently about this North Dakota bank rule. It's very old. It's from I think the 1800s or something, back when they were just pioneers and couldn't reach the federal government. Right. You know, I know California's trying to do anything they can, and I've heard a couple of people talk about it here. You know, they're exploring everything they could do. The Indian reservations. Yeah, you know, but I don't know how far along they are in that. And I'm not as super familiar with exactly what the North Dakota banking structure is, but I did hear about it very recently.
I think we have time for like 1 or 2 more questions before we hit 1 o'clock. Go ahead.
This banking situation, is there any talk of, and or is it even possible to start a new bank that's, for example, like a private bank? I don't know a lot about credit unions, that may fall into it, or a mutual bank where everybody that puts money in is a part of it. That can then, the money can be reinsured by like a Lloyd's of London.
That's something, that's something
you don't need FDIC, or is there a federal requirement that all banks in this country, no matter what form they take, are required?
I think Danielle has the answer.
I think
there would be
one of the
definitely
biggest concerns is you need to get a master account with the Federal Reserve. They process transactions between banks.
Right,
and
it's wire transfers.
It's actually, that is the stop.
So that's where it goes back.
That's where it stops, yeah.
So nobody would take the check from your bank, essentially.
You're
So
welcome.
I could always come to your bank and deposit my check, but I can't use your check at Sears, and I can't use your check at Bank of America, because everybody's communicating on the same system. Right, that's the problem.
I'm talking about literally private bank in its own box that exclusively deals with this issue.
I'm sure, I suppose theoretically you could hang out your shingle, store people's money in the basement,
and
offer to cash their checks. If Lloyd's of London were to insure you.
California.
Yeah.
But I will say that I have never heard of any bank, and let me know if anybody has, that has actually lost its insurance or gotten in trouble with the federal government for working with the cannabis business. Not one. So
Thanks, everyone.
Well, they handled it privately, and I know a few people in Humboldt County where the growers used the money to fund construction, remodeling loans, business loans, and charged fair interest.
people are getting very creative.
Just a real comment. I know last week that the state treasurers and other officials of the state did hold a banking meeting in terms of coming,
They're definitely trying to figure it out.
They're trying to do like a banker's bank or some solution like that. So they're, the state is very interested in making above ground, getting people compliant.
The medical legal cannabis market in California 2 years ago topped out at $2.5 billion, I believe, which was just over half of the size of the national industry. So the state has a really big interest in catching
wants it more than anybody.
And figuring out what to do with those tax dollars.
I was going to ask a different question, but what about cryptocurrency?
So there was just a huge conference I got invited to, but I didn't go, and I'm kind of bummed I didn't go. But they are talking about cannabis crypto, and I'm not quite sure if it's going to be like Bitcoin or the new internet money, but there is
Something
People are
that
gonna
just
try
removes it from-
anything.
Removes it from the current system.
Right.
It does, but then I don't know how like your patients would, you know, do they have to buy the cryptocurrency and is it an exchange matter?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah,
to
and then I
figure
think
out
we
there.
would be a little scared just because we're already running on, you know, short fuse with the federal government. So we want to do it as best as possible because we still have to pay our taxes. So like, how do you pay crypto? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a lot, but
The
it
real
could be.
question I was going to ask was, what's been the impact on legalization, regulation on the involvement of organized crime in the industry?
In government.
What,
For example, a few years ago, as the Grass Valley, Nevada City area increased the amount of marijuana growing, organized crime was moving into that area, making it tougher and tougher for the independent growers. But now with legalization and regulation, I mean, I would expect organized crime to move on elsewhere.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that?
There was actually a study by RAND that came out a couple of years ago that showed that you know, the more businesses coming online and getting licensed actually drove organized crime away. And you know, it definitely creates, it makes it easier to identify organized crime from compliant operators when you can see, you know, who's licensed where and who's not. You can really go into that. And I have heard that it sort of is driving them to other black market areas away from cannabis. But that's sort of the extent of my knowledge of that. But it does, yeah, it moves it away because, you know, who's going to go to who wants to go to a cartel to buy weed? I mean, when you can go to a safe place and a, safe location.
Adrian?
I was just hoping to hear, given the experience with the county and you know, the unincorporated process with applicants, what are the leaders like yourselves going to do, you know, moving forward, working with cities and county to try to, you know, I guess, alleviate some of your concerns?
For myself, I've built the Marin County Career Association. I called all the deliveries in Marin and kind of asked them what their future plans are and trying to get them to come out of the shadows because I think a lot of people are a little nervous since we've been operating under a little gray shaded area. So I'm trying to build confidence in people, and then I've reached out to city officials such as Danielle O'Leary here from the city of San Rafael and kind of trying to work with her and ask her and teach her how we, you know, work and what our patients need and, you know, the benefits of cannabis and that we are just good people here trying to help others. I think for the Marin County actually though, and it's a little bit different, there's more politics involved there that maybe Sabrina could touch on.
I think just sort of, you know, introducing ourselves and really educating and destigmatizing the industry to the community and really holding a lot of sort of educational forums. Another thing that, you know, people have been discussing is really depending on how this ordinance goes and what we see as being potential negative or positive impacts or implications from that language, possibly putting some sort of measure on the ballot and just taking it to the voters because that will really truly gauge how the community and the county feels about whether or not to license certain types of operations. And you know that they're talking about that and building a coalition and then going around and collecting signatures. So that's just another area that's being considered.
But definitely those community outreach and education.
Yeah,
I
it
think
will always
really important.
That's always sort of been the
And there's something like this.
Yeah. Randy?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for the great information. And one of the things, the biggest things that I think is missing is education. You know, you refer to marijuana users as patients, and one of the things that I think is missing is how we really can use medical marijuana as medicine if you've got whatever your ailment is. And if you've got any suggestions regarding resources for education other than these lovely brown bags. The second piece is, have they talked about allowing like lounges like they have in Amsterdam where we can go in and enjoy ourselves?
Smoking's banned.
The on-site consumption cafes.
Yeah, so our state law actually permits on-site consumption, but it's regulated at a local level, and most localities prohibit it San Francisco
doesn't.
permits it. So come on over to San Francisco and go to Spark, get your medical card and go to Spark or go to Harvest on Geary and enjoy some education and some consumption. It's really important actually.
Fairfax and San Anselmo.
And
they allow on-site consumption if you have a card. And there's a company called Herba Buena that comes and it's an educational kind of information, and as long as you have a card, and they sell products there too.
Yeah, you always want to be really mindful of the environment you're participating in. It's operating lawfully because you always carry liability, and when you see regulations go into effect, anyone who's operating outside of that regulatory structure will be prosecuted. So you've got to assume it's exactly like the cartel issue. Once things go legal and regulated, anyone who's operating outside of that is going to be subject to heightened scrutiny.
I'm also organizing a thing called Intersection Marin, and it's going to be an educational series that we did in San Francisco in March, and we're going to replicate the skeleton over at Sweetwater and Mill Valley. So everybody who's on the list, I'll send out the information, but there will be cannabis experts speaking and some scientists behind the oil making of CBD and some exciting stuff like that to follow. I'm not sure, how much more time do we have, Russell? It's 1:10.
Negative 10 minutes. So, but obviously people have a lot of questions.
I know.
Why don't we end the meeting here? I want to thank our speakers for coming. But we will be doing another one of these, maybe more. So stay tuned, and if you have additional questions, please come on up and
thank you guys.
Oh wait, there's one final thing.
We have a raffle.
A quick raffle.